Welcome to the You at Your Best podcast. I'm your host, Morgan. Before we get into the episode, let me give a little bit of an introduction for anyone who's new. If you like listening to someone process life in real time, or you are neurodivergent, an overthinker, a perfectionist, or maybe feel things deeply, this is the podcast for you. This is a non-professional, very human podcast about choosing authenticity over performance. My goal is to remind you to always come back to yourself. I talk about very deep things. I don't avoid vulnerability, but I trust you to know what resonates, what feels safe, and what might be too much for you right now. And I also share a journal prompt at the end of every single episode to help you think. So join me if you want to create a life that actually feels like you, so that you can become you at your best. All right, let's go ahead and get into this week's episode. Hello, I hope you're doing well. Before we get into this episode, I want to offer a brief introduction to what you're about to hear. This episode is a reflection on recognizing growth and healing during some of the most difficult periods of your life, even when it doesn't feel like it in the moment. This is a reflection episode, so like a lot of my other ones, it was recorded in a very in-the-moment headspace, and I chose to keep a good amount of the original version as it naturally unfolds. Because of that, this episode may feel raw and reflective, but that is an intentional part of the experience. All right, let's go ahead and get into the episode. Hello, I hope you're doing well. I don't even know where to start with this episode because I feel like such a different person than I was even with the last episode that I recorded. I finally quit my job 2 days ago, and after quitting my job, I'm just learning so much about myself, and I don't know, things are really weird right now and it's really uncomfortable, but I wanted to sit down and make this episode and talk about what I originally planned on talking about, which is a reflection on joy. But for me, I realized while I was planning this episode last week that I can't really reflect on joy without talking about the sadness too, or the struggles that come along with it. So this episode is more about finding joy within hardship and a reflection on times that were really difficult for me. I guess it's kind of like a realization that both joy and intense pain can happen within the same time frame, within the same moment, within the same situation. While working on this reflection and just really reflecting on my past and struggles that I've been through, I realized that even through all of the hardship that I've been through and the stuff that I'm going to be discussing in this episode, I still held myself high and I still took care of myself, and I was still very resilient in a way that I never realized. So this episode is it's not just about joy as much as I wish it could be. I realized after just journaling and trying to figure out what it is, I knew that it was something about joy and healing and noticing the small parts of healing that I never really paid attention to in the past. I really want to reflect on whenever I first started healing, because I haven't been in that place in a long time. But in order to do that, I have to be sad too, and I have to talk about the sad parts. This episode naturally follows a storyline, so it'll start off me kind of explaining everything that's happening, and then I will talk a little bit more about the realizations in the end. I want to start senior year of high school after COVID hit. For me, COVID hit in my junior year of high school, and then all of my senior year, it was during the active pandemic and some of my college time as well. During my senior year, I was very lonely. I think COVID hitting really changed me a lot more than I ever realized. Because junior year, I had a lot of friends. Junior year was one of the happiest years of my entire high school career. And then senior year, a lot of my friends moved to online school, and losing friends all at once really negatively impacted me in a way that I never realized. Because before COVID hit, obviously I had had struggles in my life, but my life struggles started to get really bad after COVID. And for so long, I thought that maybe it was just that I had a bad childhood or a hard childhood, which I did to a certain extent. But a lot of my struggles happened after COVID hit, after losing friends and just feeling so out of place. I felt like there was something off about me, like I wasn't a good friend. I felt like I wasn't ever good enough. And then in college, I was around someone who made me start to slowly really dislike myself, slowly started controlling every aspect of my life. I slowly started losing myself. I remember just like feeling like I couldn't be myself. That was so hard to deal with, because for me, if I'm not able to fully be myself, if I'm not able to have my own autonomy, it's traumatizing. And that may be dramatic to some people, but that's how it was for me. And I tried so hard to do what this person wanted me to do so bad and just become their puppet, because I thought that that was what I was supposed to do, because they were like so confident in everything that they believed in, that I believed that they were right and that I was wrong. I was like gaslighting myself all the time, telling myself like, you have to do what this person says because you're not smart enough to make your own life decisions. And I believed that they were right. I believed all of the things that they made me feel about myself. I believed that I was stupid, that I wasn't good enough, that I only mattered whenever they were in control of me. I was being abused, emotionally abused. And for anyone who listened to my 2 episodes about my friendship struggles, episodes 46 and 47, this was around that same time whenever that was happening. So a huge missing piece of those episodes was that whenever everything was happening, I was also actively being mentally abused. And this person thought I was so weak. And instead of thinking like, I have the ability to help this person and be kind to this person, instead they were like, oh, this person is weak, I can control them and I can ruin their fucking life. And that's what this person did to me. All while still believing that everything that they were doing was helpful. All while still believing that I was the problem. But even then, my intuition and who I am is so loud that I couldn't shut myself down to be everything that that person wanted me to be, which meant that there was always tension there. And it felt like it was maybe more impactful on me than it would be on someone who was able to just go into survival mode. And then there's also the reality that with the way that my brain is naturally wired, I really struggle with having a lack of autonomy. During that time, whenever I was living with this person, she broke down all of who I was. She took everything that I loved and made it her own. Every part of who I am, every single thing that I loved deeply about myself became hers. And I eventually got to a place where I just couldn't allow the mistreatment anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. So I finally stood up for myself. My boyfriend and I both did. We were both living with her. I was pregnant with my daughter during this time too. And through standing up for myself, I learned that I wasn't as weak as this person made me believe I was. That I actually was doing so much better than I thought I was. And during that time, I knew like I really wanted my daughter to have a certain life, and I really wanted to be able to raise her in the way that we're raising her now. We did eventually leave from over there and we got our own apartment and things were great, and now we have a new apartment. But looking back now, seeing myself then, I was actively fighting for the life that I knew I deserved, and that I knew my daughter deserved, and that I knew my boyfriend deserved. Even though I was terrified and I thought that I was weak, I did the exact opposite of what a weak person would do, although I don't think it's fair to call anyone weak. But I did the exact opposite of what I believed I was, and I never reflected on how important that is, and how, despite everything, I still knew what I needed. I still took care of myself. I still stood up for myself. And looking back now, there's so much joy knowing that I put in so much effort to create the life that I now have. And also I had my podcast during that time too. So even then I knew what my purpose was, and I was already working towards a beautiful life, and I never gave myself credit for that. I didn't notice all of the subtle ways that I was actually doing so much better than I ever thought I would, and that I am so fucking strong. I'm so resilient, and I have gotten through so many hardships all because of me. And then the next situation I'm wanting to reflect on in this episode was happening at the same time. Whenever I was going to college in person, I really struggled with social anxiety. I really felt out of place. I felt like I didn't belong. I remember I would be sitting in class on the brink of a panic attack over small things, over people noticing me, over knowing that I may have to present in that class, or just hearing the professor talk about what's expected of the class, I would be so anxious and so scared. And I would be sitting there panicking and having a full-on panic attack, but more of like a silent one. I remember I would stay in the car for hours, just sitting outside in the car instead of going inside and sitting in the library or sitting at a student sitting area in between classes. Or sometimes I would go to the bathroom and spend the 2 hours between my classes sitting in the bathroom because I was so scared to go out in front of people and for people to see me existing. I had no friends. I didn't really know how to make friends at the time. I felt like no one really liked me, and I felt like I wasn't worthy of friendships. So I just stayed to myself a lot of the time. And even whenever I would make friends, it would never stick because I would self-sabotage so much that I would run away from those friendships. But looking back now, I was so brave for even showing up to college, for going to class, for putting myself out there. And I really had no one to guide me. And for being someone who had to almost guide myself, I did so well. The next situation was at the same time whenever I was working at my job that I just quit from. I worked there for about 5 years, maybe even almost 6 years. And during that time, whenever I kind of first started working there, I had this one coworker that was really unkind to me. I remember one instance where my other coworkers went outside to smoke because they smoked and I didn't, so I had to stay in the kitchen to watch over so that like if someone came or whatever, someone would be in there, which meant that they got to take a break and I didn't. So during that time, I got on my phone, I started playing a game as I was just working and doing my job, getting things done. And whenever they all came back in, this coworker took my phone out of my hand and told me that I'm not getting my phone back until the end of the day because I was playing on my phone too much, which was shocking because they got to take a break and I didn't. There were many instances where I felt like I was kind of used because I have always been a really hard worker. And whenever you're a hard worker, people really like to take advantage of that. I started that job with like this headspace of like, I genuinely enjoyed it. I genuinely enjoyed doing the job because it was predictable and the routine was always the same and it was nice and it was simple and easy. And I didn't mind doing the work. It was nice doing it because I could listen to a podcast or I could listen to music as I was doing my job. But it slowly started to get to the point to where my coworkers would all be standing to the side talking to each other and I would be the only one getting our job done. Or there were times where that coworker who was so unkind to me would, in front of other people, tear me down or make me feel small, say really unkind things to me. There was one time where they pushed me out of their way. And I think they did those things whenever they felt small, maybe to like push that onto me instead. And for a long time, I felt so angry at myself because I just kept on letting it happen and I didn't say anything. I remember there were days where I would just be so angry. It was just like the most anger I had ever felt in my body in my entire life. But none of my coworkers actually knew how angry I was because I was so good at hiding it. I was so good at making it seem like everything was perfectly fine and I was happy and I was okay with the fact that I was being mistreated, even though I wasn't. But my anger was mostly directed at myself. I felt angry for the fact that I didn't stand up for myself, or angry for the fact that I let something like that happen to me. But looking back, I see now that I was actually healing because I was actually feeling angry. I felt angry that I was being mistreated. Genuinely, I was so angry that it was unbearable, but that's a good sign. That anger is a sign that we care about ourselves. And me not standing up for myself, that was the trauma response. That was the reality of how I responded in an environment that felt very emotionally and even physically unsafe. That wasn't me disliking myself or being unkind to myself or letting people walk all over me or letting people treat me poorly. That was my nervous system shutting down in an environment that didn't work for me. And after I felt this anger, this resentment, I slowly started growing and getting better and working towards where I am now. So a list of a couple examples that show the different times in my life whenever I started to heal. First of all, it was resentment, the anger. That was the first thing that came. And then I started releasing shame. I started listening to podcasts that align more with who I am and less with who other people said that I should be. I started understanding how my brain works and how I process things. I stopped calling myself names. I started allowing myself to cry without needing to judge myself or fix it. I started letting my body process emotions through movement. I started using music and lyrics as a way to process emotions. I started writing again. I stopped dressing in certain ways and listening to music based on trends and what other people approved of, and started wearing what I thought felt best for me and what actually felt like something that I liked, and started listening to music that I actually genuinely enjoy again. I stopped worrying about other people thinking I was cringy. I just started being me. My social anxiety started going away after my daughter was born, and I've noticed that it wasn't ever any big moment. It was more of a bunch of different small moments that added up to where I'm at right now, sitting here recording this episode. Healing never stops. We always grow, we always change. So right now, something that I've been getting really good at is noticing small beauties in the world, like trees, the sky, animals, sounds, my body, because I'm slowly shifting from a state of fight or flight to a state of presence and having a calm nervous system. So the point of this episode is to explain that sometimes we think we're broken. Sometimes we think that we're not good enough or things are really bad until we look back and we realize that we were actually healing the entire time. And I think this is the part that really matters. What I want you to take from this episode. When I look back on those hard moments in my life, I can see now that I wasn't just struggling, I was also healing. And that's something I didn't understand while I was in it. So if you're in a place right now that feels heavy or confusing or painful, I'm not saying to ignore that or try to force yourself to be positive. I'm saying to let yourself feel all of it. The heartbreak, the anger, the sadness, the confusion. But at the same time, gently start looking for the small moments of joy that exist within it too. Because both can exist. And sometimes that's what healing actually looks like. And what I've realized is that this moment right here, while I'm recording this episode, this is what I need to finally release all of this and finally be more present, be grounded in my body. For so long, I let people decide who I was. Whenever all I ever really needed was to just be me. Who I am is I've always been so introspective, and I've always had a perfect mix of intuition and genuine intellect, and I wasn't ever missing anything. All of who I am was always right here where I'm sitting, in my bedroom, in my home that's safe, finally feeling safe for the first time in my life. I am truly loved for who I am, and I don't have to change anything about me, and creating a life that I've always wanted ever since I was a kid, but other people thought was stupid or irresponsible. It was illogical. And like, I just feel so connected to little me. There was never anything wrong with her. Ever. She was always perfect, and she deserved to be treated like she was. She deserved to be loved for exactly who she was. And now she gets that, and it hurts because I didn't get it then. Not because they were bad people, but because they were struggling themselves too. But now I can be that for little Morgan. Whenever I try to picture little me, I look so much like my daughter. Like, identical. The only difference is that she has blue eyes and I have brown eyes. And I think about my daughter, and then I think about how little I was, and I just can't believe that I wasn't protected in the way that my daughter is now. I see how fragile a little child is, and I can't believe people don't have the instinct to protect that fragile little kid or person that's younger than them or person that is clearly struggling. And I get it, intellectually I get it, but emotionally I don't. And like, there's grief in that. But for me, healing comes whenever I let myself feel all of everything. I can't do the toxic positivity. Positivity comes whenever you let yourself fully experience every single emotion that you have. For this week's journal prompt, think back to a time in your life that is maybe full of regret, anger, sadness, resentment, anything like that. And try to think of signs that you were actually healing or doing way better than you thought you were. And I actually want to share mine. I've shared a little bit of this throughout the episode, but just to give a little bit of an idea of how you could frame this in your journal. So for me, I put, looking back, I can see that I was healing when, and then I'll name some of the things that I listed. I started releasing shame. I started understanding my brain. I started feeling resentment towards people who hurt me. I slowly started trusting myself. I stopped calling myself names. I stopped forcing myself to listen to trendy music or dress trendy. I started allowing myself to cry. I started letting my body process emotions through movement. I started finding podcasts that align more with who I am. Just really think about, like, during hard times, what is proof that you were actually doing so much better? Not as a way to dismiss yourself, but as a way to reframe negativity as a normal part of life, and to see that not every single moment has to be only hard. And how we choose to see our life is inevitably how our life ends up. Okay, that's all for today. If something in this episode resonated, share it with a friend who needs a little reminder that they're not alone. If you want more conversations like these, be sure to follow and rate this podcast. Downloading this episode is one of the best ways to help this podcast grow, so be sure to do that. If you want to find me on social media, all of my links are in my link tree in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next Sunday.